The last policy we'll be discussing to decrease income inequality is lower marginal tax rates. Lower marginal tax rates will cause higher disposable income in households, will increase business activities, and will also shift the aggregate demand curve to the right. If you look at the bottom of the slide, you'll notice two graphs. To the right, you'll see an economy that's contracting because of a decrease in aggregate demand. And to the left, you'll see an economy that is expanding due to an increase in aggregate demand. So basically, an increase in higher disposable income will lead to an increase in aggregate demand and shift it to the right. You may be wondering, why would aggregate demand be shifting due to higher disposable income? It's simple. So why does the aggregate demand curve shift? Aggregate demand is the total demand curve for all goods and services. It is composed of four main components. Aggregate demand equals consumption spending plus investment spending plus government spending plus net export. An increase in disposable income will cause an increase in consumption spending. Not only does higher disposable income increase the consumption component, but will also increase investment spending through lower interest rates. So through an increase in disposable income, we'll have two components out of the four main components that makes up aggregate demand. This is why the curve will shift to the right. Let me elaborate on why the interest rates will drop. So, since there's more physical disposable income in households, there will be a decrease in demand for credit or a decrease in demand for money that people need to borrow from the bank just because there's so much money on hand. So, as a way to get more borrowers, the bank will lower its interest rate as an incentive to get people to start back borrowing again. If you notice the chart below, the middle MS curve is the equilibrium. If the money supply decreases, there will be an increase in demand for credit. An increase in the demand for credit would mean a higher interest rate. That's MSD. But if you look at the curve, the slope to the right, MSI, that basically shows what happens when there's more disposable income in the economy. The money supply increases, so the demand for credit is lower. So the interest rate for credit will be lower as an incentive just to get people back borrowing. How does disposable income increase business activity? Let me elaborate. So, as consumption spending increases, various firms will have increased sales, meaning they will have to increase their labor force to meet the new market demands. This bigger labor force will cause increased wages and decrease in unemployment. If you look at the bottom of my slide, I have a graph to show my concept. So if you look at W1 and N1, that's the initial equilibrium. So if there's an increase in disposable income, meaning that aggregate demand increases, and you see the shift in aggregate demand. So since demand increases to meet that new demand, that new market demand, you have to increase quantity of labor and increase the wages. These two both will help businesses and also help to decrease income inequality. Once inequalities and poverty are addressed, a country will display a higher life expectancy, higher educational levels, higher employment, and higher human development index. This will all lead to an increase in gross national income, which will allow all citizens the ability to stimulate the economy. For my last slide, I will show the relationship between GDP per capita and Human Development Index. As Human Development Index increases, so does gross domestic product per capita. This means that as human development, as the Human Development Index increases, so does the average living standards. As the GDP per capita increases, it also means the economic well-being of all citizens is increasing, meaning that more people can probably stimulate or participate in the economy, meaning there will be higher amounts of economic growth.